Welcome to the things that bother me. If you're here, chances are something feels off. Maybe more than one thing. Maybe you've noticed that life keeps getting more expensive, harder, and more unstable, while you're told everything is fine. This channel exists because it's not fine. Here, we talk about the things people are expected to swallow quietly. The policies, the lies, the broken systems, and the everyday realities that hit real people while powerful interests walk away untouched. Today's video is about the big beautiful bill, what it actually does once the speeches stop and the cameras leave. Not the slogans, not the promises, the fallout. We're talking about food, healthcare, work requirements, disappearing safety nets, and how all of it lands on regular people, right now, while wealth continues to move upward permanently. This isn't about left versus right. It's about up versus down. And it's about calling out what's happening instead of pretending we don't see it. So if you're tired of being told to work more, pay more, and accept less, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. The bill comes due. There's a moment in every political cycle when slogans stop working, when chants fade, when signs come down, when the crowd goes home, and real life shows up with a clipboard, a denial letter, and an empty fridge. That moment is now. The big beautiful bill didn't arrive with sirens. It didn't come labeled as austerity. It didn't announce itself as punishment. It came wrapped in marketing language, efficiency, freedom, fairness, relief. It came with applause lines and promises that no one will be hurt, that waste will be cut, that working people will finally win. But legislation doesn't live on podiums. It lives in households. And inside those households, the fallout is already visible. Coverage lost, benefits reduced, costs shifted downward, and blame pushed sideways. This report is about what happens after the rally, after the vote, after the talking points stop working. This is about the damage, slow, bureaucratic, and devastating, now unfolding. Section 1, Medicaid, the quiet mass eviction from healthcare. Medicaid wasn't reformed. It was rationed. What's happening on the ground? Eligibility tightening disguised as verification. Work requirements that ignore caregiving, disability, and unstable labor. Redeterminations designed to fail, not help. Administrative churn that cuts people off even when they still qualify. Families aren't being told, you no longer deserve care. They're being told, you missed a form. You didn't respond fast enough. Your income fluctuated for 1 month. This is policy by paperwork. The real fallout, children losing coverage mid-treatment, diabetics rationing insulin, cancer screenings skipped, mental health care abandoned. Emergency rooms absorbing preventable crises at 5 times the cost. Hospitals don't get stronger, they get overloaded. States don't save money. They shift costs to emergency rooms, counties, and families. And the people pushed out, they don't disappear, they deteriorate. Section 2, Food Assistance. Hunger by design. SNAP wasn't slashed outright. That would look cruel. Instead, it was constricted. Expanded work rules for older adults. Time limits reinstated and shortened, benefit recalculations during peak inflation. States given flexibility to deny faster. The result isn't less dependency, it's more hunger. Families now face skipped meals to keep kids fed, parents eating once a day, seniors choosing between groceries and prescriptions, rural areas with no food banks to fall back on. This isn't about laziness, it's about math. Wages didn't rise fast enough. Rent didn't pause, utilities didn't care. Food assistance didn't trap people, it stabilized them. Now the floor is gone. Section 3, No tax on tips, the con that sold well. This policy sounded revolutionary. It wasn't, it was optics. Here's the scam. Most tipped workers already don't earn enough to owe significant federal income tax. Payroll taxes still apply. Tips fluctuate and are unreliable. Employers quietly use it as justification to freeze base wages. Benefits tied to reported income, Social Security, unemployment, disability shrink over time. So who wins? Employers who avoid raising wages. Politicians who get applause. A narrative that blames workers for not earning enough tips. Who loses? Workers when tips drop. Workers when benefits are calculated lower. Workers during slow seasons, recessions, or illness. Workers at retirement, when decades of underreported income come back to haunt them. It wasn't structural reform. It was a headline. Section 4, the compound effect. How this builds over time. This is where the real damage happens, not all at once, but layered. Year 1, confusion, coverage churn, missed paperwork, benefit interruptions. Year 2, medical debt rises, preventable conditions worsen. Food insecurity becomes normalized. Families burn through savings. Year 3, workforce participation drops due to untreated illness. Local hospitals close units. Schools absorb hungry, sick kids. Crime tied to desperation, not morality increases. Year 4 and beyond, a sicker workforce, higher emergency spending, lower productivity, deeper inequality, a permanent underclass locked out by bureaucracy, not choice. This isn't fiscal responsibility, it's deferred collapse. You don't save money by letting people fall apart. You just delay the bill and make it bigger. Section 5, who this really hits. Not the loudest voices, not the well-connected, not the people with buffers. It hits working families hovering just above the cutoff, older workers with worn bodies, disabled people who don't look disabled, kids whose parents did everything right and still lost, rural communities with zero backup systems. And it hits Generation X especially hard, too young for retirement, too old to recover easily, squeezed between caring for parents and kids while losing the very supports that once existed. Section 6, you cheered the cuts, and now you're paying for them. Yes, you. This is for the people who clapped, nodded, and smugly said, good, about time. You didn't understand what you supported, and now your wallet is explaining it to you. SNAP cuts don't lower prices, they raise them. Let's start with food, since that seems basic enough. When SNAP money is cut, it does not vanish into thin air. It leaves a hole in grocery store revenue. Stores do not absorb that loss. They replace it. How? By raising prices on everyone else. Rent, fuel, distribution, labor, none of that got cheaper. So when SNAP dollars disappear, corporations recover profits by raising shelf prices, shrinking package sizes, killing discounts, increasing fees. You didn't stop freeloaders. You became the replacement funding source. Every time you complain about grocery prices now, that's you paying for the cuts you supported. Medicaid cuts mean your insurance costs go up. This one is just flat out humiliating that it had to be explained. When people lose Medicaid, they still get sick. They still show up at hospitals. They just can't pay. Hospitals don't eat those costs. They pass them on. To who? You, your employer, your insurance plan. That means higher premiums, higher deductibles, higher copays, narrower coverage. Rural hospitals close. You screamed about people getting free health care, then volunteered to subsidize uncompensated care at a higher rate. Brilliant. Now let's talk about the overtime lie you swallowed. You thought, if I make $20 an hour, my overtime is $30 an hour, and that $30 is tax-free. Wrong. Here is how it actually works. If you make $20 an hour, overtime pays $30 an hour. $20 equals your regular wage, $10 equals the overtime premium. Only the $10 is eligible for the tax credit. Not exempt. Not untaxed. A credit. And here's the part you really missed. Your entire paycheck is still fully taxed. Every dollar, every pay period, federal withholding, payroll taxes, state taxes, all of it comes out now. You don't see this benefit in your check. You might see it later, at tax time. If you qualify, if it still exists. If it hasn't been capped, phased out, or rewritten. So you worked longer hours, paid full tax up front, and were promised a possible rebate on part of the overtime premium down the line. That's not relief. That's a coupon for exhaustion. Tips and overtime, temporary bait, permanent damage. Now let's connect the dots you keep refusing to see. The no tax on tips gimmick, temporary. The overtime credit, temporary. Sunset clauses, expiration dates. Quiet endings, just long enough to get applause, win votes, create the illusion of helping workers. Meanwhile, the tax cuts for billionaires, corporations, capital gains, inherited wealth. Those are permanent, locked in, protected, untouchable. So what did you actually support? Temporary crumbs for workers. Permanent wealth transfers upward, a smaller tax base, bigger deficits, which are then used as justification to cut Medicaid more, cut SNAP more, cut housing, education, and disability programs. You didn't get helped. You helped build the excuse. You worked more, paid more, and got less by design. Here's the final reality you keep avoiding. You traded your time, your health, your body, your family life for a maybe credit on part of your overtime. That expires. While the people at the top got permanent relief without lifting a finger. That's not winning, that's being managed. The end result, higher grocery prices, higher insurance premiums, longer hours, worse health, less security, and somehow you're still told this was good for you. You didn't cut waste. You cut the supports that kept costs from landing on your shoulders. This wasn't complicated. This wasn't hidden. This was math. And math doesn't care who you wanted punished. It just sends the bill. Section 7, the age trap. How they kick people off on paper while the jobs don't exist. This part was done quietly, because if it were explained honestly, people would have noticed the setup immediately. They didn't just cut programs. They changed the math so millions fail eligibility automatically. Children 14 to 17, erased from the calculation. Under the new rules, children ages 14 to 17 no longer count, the same in household calculations for assistance. That means families feeding teenagers suddenly need less. Benefit amounts drop even though food needs rise. Households with working teens are treated like they're self-sufficient. Anyone who's ever fed a teenager knows this is insane. Teenagers eat more, not less. They cost more. They don't magically become adults with disposable income. But on paper, they're treated like they barely exist. That's not reform. That's accounting fraud with a smile. Able-bodied age raised to 64. Work until you break or starve. Next comes the cruelty disguised as personal responsibility. The age for so-called able-bodied adults has been pushed up to 64. Let that sink in. People in their late 50s and early 60s, often with worn joints, chronic pain, past injuries, age discrimination, no retirement savings, are now told, work or lose food and health care. At the exact age employers stop hiring them, you didn't extend dignity, you extended punishment. And they did this during mass layoffs. Here's where it turns from cruel to stupid. These changes are happening while the economy is shedding jobs faster than it's creating them. Let's be clear, companies are laying off. Hours are being cut. Full-time jobs are becoming part-time. Applications go unanswered. Now hiring signs lead nowhere. There are more people chasing fewer jobs. And instead of responding to that reality, policymakers said, tie food and healthcare to employment anyway. That's not economic policy. That's collective gaslighting. Everything is tied to a job that doesn't exist. Here's the core problem they refuse to admit. They tied food, healthcare, housing stability, survival to employment while the labor market is contracting. So what happens? People lose benefits for failing requirements they cannot meet. Families cycle on and off programs constantly. Paperwork failures replace actual disqualification. Desperation rises, not employment. This doesn't push people into work. It pushes them into crisis. This was never about work. It was about exclusion. If this were really about employment, they would have invested in job creation, protected older workers, adjusted requirements during layoffs, counted caregiving and medical limitations honestly. They didn't, because the goal wasn't work. The goal was shrinking the roles, by any means necessary, kick people off on technicalities, age them out, paper them out, starve them out, and then point at the lower numbers and say, see, success. Final reality check. You can't require jobs that don't exist. You can't demand labor from bodies that are breaking. You can't pretend teenagers don't eat. And you can't tie survival to employment during layoffs without causing damage. But they did it anyway. And the people who cheered it on, they're about to learn something the hard way. When eligibility shrinks and jobs vanish at the same time, the fall doesn't stop at other people. It keeps going, straight through the middle. In closing, you don't get to pretend you didn't know. This is usually the part where people ask for calm, for unity, for everyone to come together and move on. No, because what happened here wasn't confusion. It was choice. You were warned clearly, repeatedly, and in plain language about what these cuts would do, and you ignored it. Not because the information wasn't available, but because you didn't like who it might help. You chose slogans over structure, punishment over outcomes, feelings over math, and now the consequences are stacking up faster than excuses. They didn't just cut SNAP and Medicaid. They changed the rules so millions would fail eligibility without ever being told that's what was happening. They erased teenagers ages 14 to 17 from household calculations, pretending families suddenly need less food, right when grocery costs are exploding and teenagers are eating more than ever. They turned growing kids into accounting ghosts, so benefits would quietly shrink. They raised the so-called able-bodied age all the way up to 64, forcing people in their late 50s and early 60s, bodies worn down, joints wrecked, age discriminated out of the workforce, to either work or lose food and health care. At the exact same time the economy is laying off more people than it's hiring. That's not tough love. That's a trap. They tied food, health care, and basic survival to employment while jobs are disappearing, hours are being cut, and now hiring signs lead nowhere. They demanded work from a labor market that isn't there, and then blamed people for failing requirements that can't be met. This wasn't about work. It was about exclusion. Kick people off on paper, age them out, paperwork them out, starve them out, then point at the reduced numbers and call it success. You applauded that. You cheered while SNAP was gutted, then acted shocked when grocery prices shot up. Because stores don't absorb lost SNAP dollars, they replace them by charging you more. You backed Medicaid cuts, then screamed when your insurance premiums rose. Because hospitals don't eat unpaid care, they pass it straight to private plans. You swallowed the overtime and tip scams, thinking they were real help, only to find out your checks were fully taxed anyway. The benefit was a delayed maybe credit on a fraction of your pay, and the whole thing expires while billionaire tax cuts stay forever. Temporary crumbs for workers, permanent protection for wealth, and the most brutal part, you helped justify it all. You mocked the warnings. You dismissed the people already struggling. You convinced yourself that suffering was a moral failure instead of a policy outcome. Now the suffering is shared. Now it's your grocery bill, your insurance premium, your exhausted body working longer hours for less security, your turn to fail a requirement because the job doesn't exist. And suddenly it's a problem. But here's what you don't get to do anymore. You don't get to act surprised. You don't get to claim betrayal. You don't get to say, no one told us. You were told exactly what would happen when you cut food, cut healthcare, raise age thresholds, erase teenagers, and tie survival to jobs during layoffs. You just didn't care until the bill showed up at your door. This system didn't malfunction. It worked exactly as designed. It gave workers slogans and coupons. It gave the wealthy permanence. It hollowed out the middle. And it trained people to punch down while the money flowed up, untouched, untaxed, locked in forever. The bill is here now. It has your name on it. And this time, there's no program left to absorb the shock. That wasn't a mistake. That was the plan. That is what you voted for. That is what you will pay a price for. Thank you for spending your time here with me on the things that bother me. I know this stuff isn't always easy to sit with, but it matters. And the fact that you watched means you're paying attention. If something in this video hit home, or if you're seeing the same things where you live, I want to hear it. Leave a comment. Share your experience. If you found value in this video, take a second to like it. It really does help get these conversations in front of more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. There's a lot more to talk about. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for caring enough to stick around. I'll see you in the next one.